Hello everybody and welcome to Star Wars on High. Thank you for stopping by. In preparation for Return of the Jedi from a certain point of view, I am reading both Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back from a certain point of view, and today I've got my full review for Star Wars, a book that I absolutely slept on the first time around, and now I'm regretting it as we got some absolutely incredible stories out of this anthology. Initially, I wasn't sure how I would feel about these books, because the idea of fitting 40 stories into one book seemed a little too disconnected for me, but I was absolutely wrong. The stories bounce off of one another, retelling the story of A New Hope from start to finish, and I had no idea that it would do that, otherwise I would have read this book sooner. It's such a fascinating way to look back on the original trilogy as it just breathes much more life into these movies. We get to focus on a lot of background characters that no one usually thinks about, and we find out that everyone's story and part that they play in the galaxy was just as important in its own way. I also learned that Penguin Random House loves to hire authors who work their own traumas into these stories because they had no right making half of these stories as sad as they were. By the Force, there were so many times where I was a bubbling mess driving home from work because I'm learning about the capture and fate of the Dianoga in the trash compactor, or that there was a Jawa who dreamed of being in the stars, or how R5 was lonely and just wanted someone to talk to. My fragile heart simply cannot take it, and I know it's only going to get worse in Empire, so I'm already not prepared. But the big takeaway from these books is that, to me, they feel the most like Legends material. And when you think about it, from a certain point of view, really looks like a combination of the Tales series that we had in Legends. This time around, it's mainly Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina, as we spend a good amount of time in there with about 5 different stories. And while I get that there are plenty of characters in that bar to discuss, I don't think we needed all of them. There were a surprising amount of stories that I loved. Meg Cabot's story about Aunt Beru was powerful and emotional, and Will's by Tom Engelberger had me laughing the whole time. The amount of styles and character traits that we see in this book really show the expansiveness that is the Star Wars universe. It fills in a lot of plot holes while opening some new ones as well, but I personally think that's the beauty of this type of book. It's all in the title, from a certain point of view. I don't think that everything within this book needs to be the say-all be-all of the story, especially when you have several that take place in the same area. It's bound to get a little mixed up. There were 2 stories about the Battle of Yavin, for example, where one mentioned Green Squadron being at the Battle of Yavin, while another said that all squads were reformed into Red and Gold squadrons. But that in itself is nothing extreme enough for me to have a problem with it. I think these stories are meant to be taken as something fun. It's not supposed to bring in new massive plot points or story arcs. It's just building upon what we already know, which is the bread and butter of Star Wars. Now, of course, not every story in this book is going to be for everyone. I know of 2 stories that I skipped because I was completely unaware of what was happening in the story, and I just could not get it to click in my head. The first one being The Clue-Horn Cantina Caper by Kelly Sue DeConnick and Matt Fraction. I made it about halfway through the story before giving up and moving on. I just could not follow anything that was going on, and it just could not hold my interest. The second story was Of MSC-6 and Men by Glenn Weldon, and while I can appreciate the homage to John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men, I could not for the life of me understand anything in this story. The constant droid updates kept throwing me off, and when I realized that this was the bulk of the story, I just had to move past it. Now, this is not to say that those 2 stories are bad, as I'm sure some people loved them, but they just were not for me. Overall though, Star Wars from a certain point of view brought back a lot of the nostalgic feel that I had as a 5-year-old, watching A New Hope for the first time and being in absolute awe the entire time. I'm hoping the feelings continue with Empire and the long-awaited Return of the Jedi, but we'll just have to wait and see. Definitely a book worth picking up, but as I am the late one on this, I want to know if there's anyone else that has not read this book and may be interested now. Let me know down in the comments. Have you also been hesitant to pick up Star Wars from a certain point of view? And if you have read it, what was your favorite story? Let me know all of your thoughts down in the comments below. As always, thank you to everyone who stuck around to this point in the video, and we hope to see you again very soon.